All right, there's a political betting market, and there is a way that someone who bet on it could theoretically make a lot of money, which I absolutely do not endorse. And this is not at all to be construed as financial advice. I am not giving financial advice or advising anyone to do this. But if I were to make bets, hypothetically, I've seen some lines on this site, Ladbrokes, which I guess is where lads go to get broke. I wouldn't do that. But I think the foreign bookies are really misunderstanding the U.S. elections because foreigners' perception of the U.S. is driven by U.S. institutional media. I think this is an example of market failure, where foreigners are betting and setting the lines primarily, and foreigners' perception of the U.S. are way out of whack from reality. So I have a few categories for how I, hypothetically, would make a card on this election. So there's three categories of bets I see here. One is would be the risky money bets, the safe money bets, and what I put in quotes, free money bets, although there's no such thing really, but it's the closest thing. So first, the risky money bets. Going through these, I see Minnesota. Now, Minnesota, I think, leans Biden, but the payout is $375 for a $100 risk. So if I were making a portfolio, I would put a small amount on Minnesota going Republican. I wouldn't put any money on any of these risky bet states that I wasn't prepared to lose, right? So I wouldn't put any money on Minnesota that I wasn't prepared to lose. But Minnesota especially, since I think you're ever so likely to actually lose it, because I think Minnesota is more likely to go Biden. But I think that payout is worth it. Nevada, at a 3.25 to 1 payout, I would also make a small bet on that, on Trump winning Nevada. But again, I think Nevada will probably go Biden, so I wouldn't put any money on Nevada that I wasn't ready to lose. And that goes true for all of this. Michigan, I think, is a better bet, and I think Michigan leans Trump. I think Michigan is close to 50-50, perhaps 55-45 in favor of Trump, but you can get $325 for risking 100, or 225% ROI. I think that is a fantastic bet. So I would put Michigan on my card. Wisconsin, I think, is an even better bet. I think Wisconsin is, if anything, 60-40 Trump, paying out $350 for a $100 risk. North Carolina gives even money. I think that's a good bet, though I wouldn't put as much into North Carolina as Wisconsin. Pennsylvania pays out $275 for 100, which I think is a pretty good bet. Not as good as Wisconsin or Michigan. New polling data, and I know, I try to stay away from polls, but there's been a shift in Pennsylvania. That's what's more important than the absolute numbers, regarding a cratering of Biden's support in the Philadelphia area. And that makes me think Trump is going to win Pennsylvania. But at least I think a fair line would be Pennsylvania to have even money. But you're getting way more than a fair line. You're getting a 175% ROI on Pennsylvania, when I think a fair line would be about 100% ROI. So again, not as good as Wisconsin or Michigan. I think those are the two best risky money bets. But I would also put some on Pennsylvania just to diversify in case Michigan and Wisconsin go Biden. All right, again, don't put anything down. I wouldn't put anything down that I wasn't willing to lose, that I wasn't ready to lose. Another bet is that Trump wins the whole thing, which pays out $262.50 for a $100 risk. And again, I think that's a great bet because I think Trump has around a 70% chance of winning the whole thing. Okay, so those are the good bets, the good risky bets that I think. The next category of bets I would say are safe money bets, safe-ish bets, betting the favorites here. Georgia, I think, is a good bet. They're giving you 8 to 11 odds, and that's a relatively low risk, 72% return on investment. So you can basically pick Trump to win Georgia and get $72 for risking 100 on that. So I would put something in that. Iowa is another good bet, 8 to 15 odds. That's a 53% return on investment. I don't think that's as good as Georgia. I think Georgia is a better bet from a risk-reward ratio. In fact, I think Georgia is more likely to go Trump than Iowa. I think both are going to go Trump, but I think Georgia is more likely, and they're giving you a higher payout for Georgia. So I think Georgia is better than Iowa, but I would still put some on Iowa just for diversification. But the two best bets I see here, the two safest bets that I would put a significant amount of money into are the states Ohio and Texas. Ohio pays out a 44.44% ROI, which I think is crazy, because I think Ohio is like 95% chance going Trump. I think Ohio is kind of in the bag for Trump. So that payout, 44.44%, is, I think, a little nuts. And even more nuts, unbelievably, these stupid foreigners are giving a 33% payout for Texas. Now these are people who have been like looking at like Nate Silver, right? And basically, you know, I'm thinking like if you're in the U.S. like you do research on the world, you may do research on like a foreign country. So it's like, oh, I'm going to do research on Russia. And so I'm going to know more about Russia than anyone in the U.S. But the thing is, your research on Russia is going to be very surface level compared to what the person living in Russia knows about Russia, right? Just as a rule. Okay, and I think that's sort of what's happening with the U.S., is that these foreigners, they're developing a perception of the U.S. by researching the U.S., but when they research the U.S., what are they doing? They're looking at like Fox News polls, CNN polls, you know, what Nate Plastic is doing, right? And so I think this is that market failure that we're seeing here, and an effect of U.S. bettors not being able to bet in these, not being able to bet on U.S. elections, and that's resulting in some rather crazy lines. If U.S. citizens were allowed to bet on these elections, I think there would be much less value in this. So a 33% payout for Texas, which I think is something like 98, maybe even 99% chance going Trump. I would pump a pile of money into Texas and Ohio on this. Okay, and there's other states that they're giving you ROI for things that aren't really even bets. For example, Kansas, they're giving you a 1 to 25 payout. This is basically a free 4% ROI. Same with Louisiana, a free 1 to 25 or 4% ROI. So yeah, you just, this is just free money for clicking a few buttons. Alaska is giving a 1 to 7 payout. That's basically a free 14% return on investment. Mississippi is giving a 4% ROI. Missouri is giving you a 10% ROI. Missouri. Montana at 8%. There's a Democrat bet you could make, which is betting Democrats to win New Jersey. That gets a 4% ROI. South Carolina, betting on Republicans for South Carolina, gets a 6.25% ROI. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking this looks kind of crazy. Again, I'm not advising anyone to bet on this election, which is illegal in the U.S. It is illegal to bet on U.S. elections in the U.S. Don't do it if you're a U.S. citizen. Okay? So that is this is not advice on what to do. This is entirely hypothetical sort of thought experiment, with the point being that betting markets on U.S. elections are distorted by having a lack of U.S. bettors on these markets. And so you end up getting foreigners who have a very surface level view of the U.S. that's basically constructed by institutional media that's resulting in very skewy, squirrely lines. All right. So these lines seem to be warped by media polling reports, and the degree to which this media polling distorts betting markets ends up being value that one could theoretically make a pile of cash on, that I am not advising anyone to do. Okay? So that's just what I want to say here.